Mossad technically begins in 48 with the creation of Israel, but there had been a kind of, you could argue there was an effective Zionist intelligence movement before that. I mean, the people had been collecting information. It just didn't, it's not like, oh, let's start an intelligence agency and you go out and recruit some people. It also had the advantage of getting people who had been parts of other intelligence agencies. I mean, what the Mossad was eventually assembled from, it had no track record. There were people there who had worked for everything from the OSS to the British to the French to the Soviets. And that's, I think, one of its strengths. It was able to, through that diverse personnel, to bring in elements from all of those different services. So, much like the Israeli military, Israeli intelligence, foreign intelligence, the Mossad has been highly effective. And it's not because of how large they are. It has to do with dedication of purpose. It has to do with the variety of experience that you could create within the organization. And they have been, I don't think this, in terms of combating their primary enemy, which, let's face it, are Arab governments and also things like the PLO and the rest, that they have held the advantage in that for the most part. I could be wrong, but I can't think of any opposition, any Arab intelligence agencies, Egyptians or otherwise, who have ever been able to effectively combat. And one of the things to look at this is who's infiltrating who. And that goes back to something again, in the CIA, that's what James Jesus Angleton spent his entire counterintelligence career worrying about. And he was obsessed with the idea that there was a Soviet mole inside the agency. Some people thought he was being paranoid. He thought he was being prudent. Was he paranoid? Was he prudent? Well, I mean, you know the moles that get caught. You don't know the ones that don't get uncovered. And that becomes part of a very ticklish situation in which, if you are a mole which has infiltrated another organization, the whole idea is you want to stay in place, which means that you have to be very careful how you proceed. If suddenly everything goes wrong, then sooner or later that's going to point back to you. So you're going to have to let operations proceed against your actual employer simply to maintain your cover. That would be necessary, which means that your agency itself has to be willing to sacrifice some of its own people in order to maintain in place, in order to maintain the credibility, the cover of a more important agent. So those, again, could be argued to be sociopathic decisions. These people all work for us, and they're all perfectly loyal, and this person has done a particular job, but we're going to throw them under the bus, literally, because we need to sacrifice them to protect a more important agent. That's just a mathematical calculation that you would make.
Okay, so, wow, there's a lot of points that I want to come back to, but you mentioned that idea of sacrificing one of your own. So that reminds me of this story that I heard from a Mossad officer. To try to keep it concise and not butcher the story. Essentially, the idea was that they had compromised somebody that was involved with either, I don't recall, it was either Hamas or some sort of Palestinian organization. They had recruited this person, and he started working for the Mossad. And what happened is they started to use him, and the Palestinians basically asked him to go find out like something kind of benign or out in the open about the Israeli like structure of the way things were. And I forget what the context was, but the Mossad said, okay, well, we assume that this information, like if you can see it, then he can see it, and it's out there enough, like it's not gonna hurt us. Give him the information to build the trust. So he does. He gives the Palestinians the information, and then they ask him to go find a spot in the border wall so that the Palestinians can sneak into Israel. And so he tells the Mossad this, and they said, okay, well, let's find a spot together. And, this is where you'll tell him to go. And then we'll have a little surprise waiting for him on the other side. So they do that. He tells them the spot, and they said, okay, well, we want you to come with us, just kind of as an insurance policy. And he tells the Mossad this. And again, this is the Mossad officer recounting this afterwards in an interview. And he says, basically their calculus was that if we tell him no, or if he says I can't go, that would kind of blow his cover, or at least raise a red flag and possibly burn him as an agent or as a resource. So they told him, okay, well, go with them. When you get over the border and the gunshots start, hit the deck, and we have ways to make sure that you're not hit. And essentially that was total bullshit. And basically their calculus was, and the way he explained it was sacrificing a pawn off the chessboard. Mm-hmm. And so how often does an intelligence agency like burn their own agents like that?
If you're a career service officer, you would get more protection than you would if you were an asset. I mean, it's the assets who are disposable. Those are people who are recruited for a particular purpose. You're using them. And their survival is not as important as someone who is a GS-15, someone who is part of the organization. And there's that distinction. If you're an asset, I think people tend to confuse what's the difference between an intelligence officer. An intelligence officer is someone who has a rank and a position and a salary. They're a government employee. They are an assigned employee of the particular agency of a particular government. They're a real person in the view of that agency. Assets are the people who are recruited for a particular task. Usually it's for information. It can be so disinformation, it's for any kind of purpose, and they're just there as needed. They're like someone you hire to come in and install tile in your house or elsewhere. They do a job and then they're gone. You have no long commitment to them. You're perfectly friendly to them as long as you're there out of common politeness. But you're going to pay them off and they'll disappear. Or you'll kill them off and it will disappear. If there's any problem about them talking about what they did otherwise. The thing you never want to be in any situation, you should always look around for, is to be a loose end. And there's a particular, I go back to Jean Le Carré and Spy Who Came In From the Cold, which is probably my favorite book and spy film. And particularly if you see the Richard Burton film, and there's a character, I won't go through the whole complicated plot in this, but it's all about keeping secrets. And there's one female character who gets involved in this. In many ways, she's just a perfect innocent, but she's built into it. But in the end of this, she has become a loose end. She knows way too much. There's no way she's going to survive. She will have to be killed. And the main character sacrifices himself for that as well. It's a spoiler in the film in this case, but that's it. But that was known from the beginning that would have to be the case. That this person must be used and then they will be discarded and they will be eliminated. So I don't know. It's just more examples of lying and the human capacity for deceit. But you see, it's all for a greater cause.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Isn't that the thing? That's in fact what in the Spy Who Came In From the Cold thing, the head of British intelligence is telling him to begin with. It's all part of a greater cause. We may do unpleasant things, but we're on the side of freedom. See?
What's up, guys? Thank you so much for taking the time to watch the interview. If you got anything out of this video at all, please like the video, leave me a comment, tell me what you thought of the video, tell me who you'd like to see on the show. I really appreciate the support. It goes a long way on these platforms, as you guys know. Most importantly, I have some excellent interviews coming up in the future that I'm really, really excited about. So please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of them. But that's it. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate it, and hope to see you again soon.